for Global M&A Partners Limited, Dublin, Ireland. He has also held leadership positions on numerous boards in the Cleveland area by advising academic institutions such as Cleveland National College of Law, Case Western Reserve, Leatherhead School of Business, the University of Akron Finance Advisory Board, as well as Magnificat High School and St. Ignatius High Schools. Further, he has served on the board of the Great Lakes Theatre Festival while finding the time to coach his children's football, soccer, and softball teams and to broadcast games live for St. Ignatius. Once a co-owner of the Cleveland Four soccer team, he now leads the board of directors for North Coast Professional Sports LLC. You've done nothing all your life. What have you been doing at all? Mike, have you been doing nothing all your life? What have you been doing? Great to have you. Welcome back.
It's I do live a pretty active life, and I want to warn anybody if they're out driving today, they better watch their speed because there are policemen everywhere. But no, I've been this campaign is about the same as my life's always been, going from one thing to another all day long. So it's been a lot of fun.
So listen, I have a few questions.
Sure.
That I want to ask you. And I confront this every Sunday as I leave this radio program. And I drive north on 77. There's a giant billboard that says our national debt is $28.5 trillion. That works out to be $87,000 per U.S. citizen. If you're elected U.S. Senator and you're going to be part of that exclusive 100-member club, what can you do about it?
Well, frankly, there's not much we can do about it. It's unsustainable, and it's just a matter of time of when it all happens. I spent my early career in the capital, actually my whole career in the capital markets, but my early career directly involved with government bonds, and there was a time when the government would run a deficit, and then we would go out and we would sell bonds throughout the world, and individuals and institutions would buy those bonds. And we finance it just like you would, a loan for your home. We don't do that anymore. Now, the bonds are issued, and the Federal Reserve Bank buys them. What do they buy them with? Thin air.
Borrowed money? Or
Nope.
printed money?
Printed money. I mean, they make it up.
They
And
print the money.
and this is
$4
unprecedented. It's what we've seen is this quantitative easing. They buy these mortgages and government securities, and I don't know when the day of reckoning is coming, but it will come because at some point, and particularly with what we are seeing right now from the Biden administration, you can't just spend endlessly. The old definition of inflation is too many dollars chasing too few goods. We've been lucky in the last several years because there's a thing called velocity of money, how fast it turns over. It's been very slow. If that remains slow, we may survive a good bit longer. But with all this printing of money, and that's exactly what it is, we all know about the Weimar Republic after World War I and what happened in Germany with the wheelbarrows full of cash having to go to buy a loaf of bread. I think we have better controls over our monetary system than that now, but we're going to see inflation at some point. And I say that with certainty, yet we saw Japan in the 80s and 90s take on huge amounts of debt. And what that did was just kind of squelch their entire economy. So I studied economics in undergraduate school, graduate school, taught it, and you can pretty much take every book I ever used and throw it out the window right now. We're in uncharted territory.
So Mike, let me ask you, if we have 10% inflation,
Yes.
does that mean, I'm not talking about the rich people, I'm just talking about the ordinary person, does that mean that the average person takes a 10% cut in pay?
In theory, what ends up happening though is if we do hit 10% inflation, everything goes up. The wages will go up. The value of your home. If you're in an inflationary environment, you want as many fixed assets as you can. If you could buy a vacation home, do it. If you could own your own home, do it. And the crazy thing about it is, say you buy a house for $100,000. The value of that house the following year in a 10% inflationary environment will be $110,000. But your mortgage stays at $50,000. It never goes up. So every dollar that of inflationary increase in value, it's a dollar in your pocket. The deceptive thing though is the dollars just aren't worth as much. So you remember the days when we used to buy, a pack of gum for 5 cents. Now it's 50 cents or whatever it is. And that will happen generally throughout the economy. We're seeing inflation in our business. We just gave across-the-board raises to virtually everybody in the firm, other than the partners, and we're seeing it everywhere. The law firms are paying more for new associates. The banks are paying more for new. So it isn't just the trades, and certainly the trades are going to have to move their per hour wages up. Any type of clerical job, it's just going to require more. For that matter, fast food people.
What will it do though to interest rates? If somebody has to buy a house and you have 10% inflation, what would the interest rate go to?
Well,
or will
there's no rule, but generally what you see is when somebody wants to put their money in the bank and have it increase in value, well, if the value of that cash is declining every year by 10%, you've got to have 10% to keep you even. So generally what happens is interest rates go up during inflation. If you remember back in the late 70s and early 80s, we had, my first mortgage was at 15 3/4.
Mine was 12.
Yeah. And well, that happens, but you could also get 15% in your CD at the bank. So historically, interest rates have tracked inflation. Again, we're in uncharted waters. In Japan, there's no inflation, and there's negative interest rates. And they have debt that well exceeds ours. Ours, we're a little bit over 1 times GNP in overall national debt. Japan's 250%.
So what are we, about 22 trillion GDP?
24-ish, yeah.
So our national debt is 28 trillion.
Yeah. We're above it, and there's a lot of ways to define what GNP is, and it's a lot of ways to define what our national debt is. You include certain contingent liabilities that aren't on the books,
like
things
pensions.
like that, right? So like pensions, you throw pensions in there, and
we're over 100 trillion, aren't we?
Yeah, we're in tough shape. So what I would say is, I recently had Rand Paul endorse me. I don't know if you're.
I was just going to ask you about that.
Oh, good, thank you. And I got to know Senator Paul over the last few years. I met him when I ran for the Senate back in 2018, and we stayed in touch. He is, when we speak, it's like talking to a mirror, because our virtually everything we
He
believe
seems
in.
very direct.
Well, yeah, and I like that. I've also been accused of being direct.
It's very hard to get a yes or no answer out of politicians.
Right.
He'll always
You'll
answer
get it out,
yes,
yeah.
and then he'd go on to say why.
Right. He's very conservative. He is. When you walk in Rand Paul's office in Washington, he has that very clock that you see on the highway with the national debt ticking in his office, in the waiting room for his office. He's very conscious of what the national debt is. And one of the big problems, Gerry, is we spend a lot of money, and there are certain things we have to spend money on, certain entitlements that everybody's they're just not going to give it up. But we waste a lot of money. There's never been a program that's been started by a federal government that just was canceled. It just keeps going on forever, whether it works or not. And I think I would like to team up with Rand Paul to go through a few of those programs.
Would you believe this? I heard that America is still giving foreign aid to Ireland.
It's very possible.
It's not a big amount, but it's still doing it. it reinforces your point, though.
Yes.
It started years and years
Right.
ago.
Never stops.
But it never stopped.
Never stops. In fact, I just heard that the last person that was due a pension from the Civil War just died a couple of years ago. The Civil War. And it just went on. And
Was his name J.C. Sullivan?
and the survivors of, you know, I mean, people still qualified and there's still payments being made.
How about all these people that hold our national debt? China holds a ton of it, and Ireland is the
Well,
number
the Fed owns
four.
most
It's the
of
number
it,
four.
yeah.
I heard that Ireland was the number 4
Yeah.
holder of U.S. Treasuries.
Right.
Would that be true?
Well, it could be true. I mean, I'm not aware of
What
that.
does that mean
I know
exactly?
Norway owns a lot of it. Norway has a huge sovereign wealth fund. A lot, you know, they've taken all the profits from their oil and pretty much put it in a big pension fund for their. You want to move someplace and get a pension, that's the place to move. But Ireland, you know, sovereign nations have to do something with their debt, and generally, the U.S. was considered the best credit quality of anything, of any country in the world. You know, you think we have it bad? China's even worse, much worse, much worse. Hundreds, you know, they're 100% higher than there.
Well, what's the downside of somebody like China owning so much of our debt?
Well, actually, it's not. I don't know if it's a downside at all, because if we just say, "Hey, China, we're not going to pay that debt," we have them. You know, they're hanging over a barrel. They're pretty.
They need us more than we need
Well,
them. Is that right?
you know, the whole idea is to have everybody need each other, so we don't bomb each other. You know, I think the world system has to work. I don't know how we're going to clear the deck here at some point, because in pretty much every Western democracy, but for the oil states, are loaded with debt.
Well, what could happen? I mean,
Well,
in our private lives, we know what debt does.
Well, I think, you know, a lot of it has to do, recently the left has come up with this modern monetary theory, and basically what they're saying is things are so big and so in place that it's just going to keep going even if the debt gets, you know, beyond anybody's wildest dreams. But what could happen in the old days, well, you saw it with Greece. Basically, you know, the EU cut off Greece, and all of a sudden they had to go through austerity. It used to be the program with the World Monetary Fund, when they would lend various countries money because they were effectively bankrupt. They couldn't borrow on the international markets, so they had no money and people were starving. They would put them through an austerity program. And I don't think it's going to happen, because I don't think people are willing to accept it, but the U.S. has to go on an austerity program. If we wanted to get rid of the debt, we'd have to go on an austerity program.
That means cutting programs.
That's right. But that would mean that all the waste would have to go away. There's enough waste out there that things that are just untouchable. You know, we give, you know, Rand Paul's, one of his favorites is talk about the National Science Foundation and the ridiculous things that we put millions of dollars into every budget. Things that, you know, are just outrageous. You know, he gave the example. He was at my house. We had a fundraiser at my house. I was very, very honored to have him there. And he talked about how the United States has paid for a study to determine whether cocaine increases the promiscuity of the tsetse fly.
Dear me.
Yeah,
Oh, my goodness.
I guess it was true. Yeah. But
But that costs money.
But yeah, it was, you know, it was millions.
So you mean some pinhead professor got paid for that?
That's right. That's right. And that's what we're doing on steroids across the board. You know, and I have to believe the military. I have a son in the military. I want him to have the finest equipment available. He's a Navy pilot, but there's got to be savings that we can come up with there. You know, I think one of the other things that Rand Paul stands for, and which I'm a firm believer in, and believe me, it really hits home when your son's out there risking his life every day. But we shouldn't be involving ourselves in every little conflict all over the world. I don't think we need to be the world's policeman. That's often said, and everybody agrees with it. We can be kind of the watchdog when things get out of hand, where it affects our interests. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of money we're spending. We spent trillions of dollars in Iraq and in Afghanistan. What have we gotten out of it?
However, Mike, I heard somebody put forth the idea that if we leave Afghanistan completely, that we have no eyes and ears in
Yes.
that part of the world?
Well, we're trying to keep.
That's a downside.
Well, it's huge. I mean, look what they did the last time. They supported Al Qaeda. Theoretically, we tied that to the 9/11 attack, and I think the world was supportive of Afghanistan. Wherever we go, I'm supportive, but I would like to be there trying to help them make the decision whether or not they should go.
Let me move back to Ohio.
Yes.
Ohio was doing very well before the virus hit. The whole country, we were at
Absolutely.
3.5% unemployment, and I thought Trump did
I
an
did.
incredible job bringing us to where we were. Of course, then the crash came. Now, is it recovering to your satisfaction?
I think it is. I think it is. We've opened up. I would have done things much differently, and I think it's one of the things that I talk about in my campaign for the Senate. I think business and being in business your whole life forces you to make common sense, rational decisions, and I don't believe that our administration in Ohio made common sense, rational decisions. We knew very early on who the people with comorbidities were, who was at risk. We know very well that COVID wasn't any worse for younger people than the flu. Apparently less people below the age of 40 have died from COVID than they've died from drowning in the United
But
States.
Florida seemed to catch on to this very quickly.
Right,
This
right.
DeSantis in Florida.
Right, I wouldn't have shut anything down. I would have kept everything open, and I would have said, you're at risk. You stay home.
50-year-old.
But it's your personal responsibility. Keep yourself, out of the situations where you could catch the virus. I was willing to accept that responsibility, and I think anybody in America should, because that's what our country's founded on: personal
It
responsibility.
worked in Florida.
That's right. It did. It did.
What about Ohio? How are we doing now?
Well, we're not doing well. We're one of the states that people leave most often. And I think a lot of it has to do with our politicians, frankly. We need to understand that jobs are created by business people and by businesses, not by government. And we need to create a business-friendly environment. We're one of the 8 most regulated states in the nation. We need to cut back our regulation. I'm running for a federal office, but I'm commenting on this, something I can't do much about. But we need to open up, kind of on the scale Trump did nationally, open up the regulatory environment for business. And I believe getting the right person in, running this state with enough creativity, with enough business experience, you could draw businesses here, and you could assess whether or not some of the things that are being started up here in this state deserve state assistance. We have what is effectively a venture capital fund. It's sitting there called Jobs Ohio, that frankly we could do a lot better with. And we've talked about Lordstown Motors in the past. It's been the subject of a lot of negative news articles, which frankly I think is a bunch of hooey, but we'll see. Here they're going to begin production in September. But here was an opportunity for 4,500 new industrial jobs, which normally translates as much as 10 to 1 in additional jobs. So you're looking at 50,000 new jobs in Trumbull and Mahoning County. And I think by the time Jobs Ohio, and believe me, I was the guy talking to these people, we couldn't get any money out of it. It was too political. I mean, things become political when they shouldn't be political.
Mike, I did hear in Pittsburgh, somebody told me lately that there's great cooperation between the business community and the politicians.
Yes.
And it has worked very well for Pittsburgh. It's a great town now. It made the transition
Right.
from a steel town to a technology town. Is
Right.
that correct?
Well, and Carnegie Mellon has helped greatly. I mean, having Carnegie Mellon there is, and we have Case Western, but we have not been able to integrate the academic, the research, business, and politics in Cleveland. they're islands unto themselves, and I believe you put the right people in place that can see clearly what could really help this region, and you could start the engine, and it could change things. We haven't had it. We've had a lot of populist, leftist mayors in Cleveland who think that somehow it's the job of the Cleveland city mayor to end poverty in the world. You know what they're supposed to do? They're supposed to collect the garbage, provide a safe environment, and make sure that they open the door for every new job that potentially is available in this city.
Mike, there's a lot of talk about this new infrastructure bill that's been
Yes.
talked about in Washington. And a lot of people are saying, with all the regulations, it could take 20 years to get approval of some of these projects.
You're exactly right, Jerry. We remember this when we had the stimulus program under Obama. They wanted to go out and get the shovel-ready jobs.
Oh, yeah.
Well, there are no shovel-ready jobs. And unfortunately, there's a bipartisan agreement now on this stimulus bill. But if you start looking at that stimulus bill, it's all a bunch of hooey also. I mean, there's a lot of things that just aren't infrastructure.
Nothing to do with them.
Yeah.
Nothing to do
And
with
we need
buildings and
infrastructure
bridges and roads.
Can't we just build
Build roads,
bridges, make sure, that we have efficiency in how we transport things around this country? That would be very helpful, but they can't seem to keep their hands out of the pie.
After the last election, Mike, I don't know if you noticed it or not, but I think the Republican Party moved closer to being the party of the working man and woman of America. What do you think of that?
Well, anybody that thinks the Democrat Party is the party of the working man can't read, or for that matter, can't listen to a conversation. The working man is aligned with the businessman. The working man works with the businessman. I believe that everybody that has an inclination toward being an entrepreneur should do it. I know I did that, and America provides you with the opportunity.
I did it myself.
Yeah, that you did, and America provides you with the opportunity to do that. And this idea that we have now, that largely espoused by the Democratic Party, that this is a horrible country, it's unequal, and one of the great fallacies out there is this misconception on the part of most people that when somebody becomes a billionaire, that they have taken $1 billion and just taken it away from all the other people in the country. What people don't understand is money is created. When Steve Jobs started Apple and everybody got an iPhone, it's not like all their money was transferred to Steve Jobs into Apple. New money was created that those people that bought the Apple had nothing to do with. And that is the fallacy that many people continue to look at people that have done well financially, wealthy people, and they say that they're terrible people, they take away from the poor. They have nothing to do with the poor. The money they have not one dime of it came from the poor people. They say, well, they're not paying their fair share.
I'll tell you, they're always said that they paid, Steve Jobs paid no taxes. But he did, right?
Well, he did. When he died, he did. I mean.
I meant Jeff Bezos. I'm talking
about. Or Jeff Bezos. If we took all of Jeff Bezos' wealth and we just said, you know what, this guy's a bad guy, he's the richest guy in the world. We're going to take it, we're going to distribute it to all Americans, and everything will be great. Well, $212 a person is what we'll get. Yet, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of jobs that we've thrown will be lost. This envy on the part of people like Elizabeth Warren, and that's what it is. It's just plain old envy. Elizabeth Warren when she was a lawyer, was flipping houses. She wanted the American dream. She just wasn't smart enough to get it. So she became a politician.
How about Bernie Sanders?
Bernie Sanders is a hypocrite.
He's a millionaire.
Yeah, yes, he is a millionaire. He's a hypocrite. He's got 2 homes. Now, I don't judge people on how much money they have, but somehow the Democrats all do. And what they ought to do is start looking in the mirror. And I don't begrudge anybody. People make decisions in their early life. All those decisions add up on where they're going to end up financially. But in this country, there's still a path for anybody that wants to work hard enough and is willing to put in the time and the effort. Maybe you aren't going to golf as much. Maybe you aren't going to play softball. All the things that I didn't do because you got to work. And I've been very fortunate, very blessed. But I gave up a lot to do it.
Mike, you were a cement finisher.
I was.
You were
Actually, I was a
laborer?
cement laborer, and I learned how to finish. They didn't let me finish. I mean, they still had the real skilled guys finishing me off. But
That's really something to go
I could
from
work a
laborer
bullfoot as well as anybody.
all the way to an investment banker. How do we do that?
Well, I mean, it
Hard
was,
work, huh?
it was
Welcome
just
to
pure
America.
luck and hard work. I didn't know what investment banking was, Jerry. I had no idea. My advisor at Case said, go show up at this address. He gave me a little slip of paper with an address on it, and I showed up and I said, what is investment banking use? They'll tell you when you get there. And I've loved it. It's great for a guy like me that likes to work on different things, and it's been a wonderful life.
What about this 12.5% Irish tax as opposed to tax the 21% that President Biden is proposing? Could you explain that?
Well, sure. The countries that can't stop spending, like America, and particularly when Democrats are in, they don't like it that they can't have corporations taxed at higher rates. And what happens is if we tax the corporations at higher rates, like Eaton here locally, Eaton Corporation,
right.
Eaton moved their headquarters to Ireland. And they're now an Irish company, not an American company. Now their operations are still here, but to avoid the tax, they moved it to Ireland. Biden wants to shut that down. He wants to say, you know what, we're all going to have a minimum tax, so nobody can move anywhere. They want to, they want to control the
But
tax base.
I think he's in agreement with the EU on that, isn't he?
Well, we're a long way away from it. But
No, I
yes.
did hear the other day that Ireland was balking at it. They said
You're
they
darn
want
right
to keep
they're gonna balk.
they want to keep their 12.5%.
They're going to buy.
Are they going to be successful?
Actually, you mentioned that I'm chairman of an Irish company, and I am. I go. In fact, I was with Eddie Crawford. I think I told you I was with Eddie Crawford. Had dinner with him when he was Irish ambassador in Dublin, and we moved our organization there because we were in Germany, and the taxes were ridiculous, and we couldn't understand them. And it was, just the regulation that we had to go through. We had a notary involved in every board meeting. We were doing things and we weren't doing them correctly. He said, what, let's move it someplace where I understand what the law is. And that's why we moved it to Dublin.
It's like dealing with the EPA.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, well, look, exactly.
So is it going to pass or not?
I
They
think
want
they're a long way away.
21%.
Yeah, I think they're a long way away from it. I really do. I don't, because, the Bermudas and the Isles of Man and nobody can force a country to set a certain tax rate. It isn't like the United Nations comes in and says, you will charge this. If that's the case, maybe they should stop the Chinese from killing the Uyghurs. So they don't have very good luck with that. Why are they going to be successful in making their tax rate change?
Well, they moved on to Hong Kong
Mike,
Right.
do you think this
and maybe Taiwan.
what about this critical race theory? It's in the news every day.
It's a
I
horrible
don't think
thing.
an awful lot of people understand it. How bad is it? How bad is it for us?
It is that bad. It's as bad as you might imagine. And you know what's really bad is the left is deceiving us. Because they're saying, whenever we say we don't want critical race theory, they go, you don't want to learn about slavery in this country, or you don't want to learn. It has nothing to do with that. Critical race theory is actually, it's a rejection of the Enlightenment. It's a rejection of Western civilization. What they're saying is, John Locke was a bad man. In all of the political philosophy that we've used to make this country a great country, we reject it because all it was used for is to oppress the people of color. Now, there were plenty of people of color oppressing other people in the part of the world. It's a contrived philosophy where socialists that couldn't figure out how they were going to convince people that socialism was good because it didn't work ever in history could adopt some new philosophy that they could now go out and impose on us. And they have managed to get colleges and universities even corporations, talking about critical race theory and trying to inject it and change the way Americans think. Literally change the way Americans think. It's a literally they reject the nuclear family. I mean, the family is the contrivance of Western civilization used to suppress people of color. I'm serious.
When you say the nuclear family,
Reason, science, and facts are the contrivances of Western civilization used to oppress people.
nuclear family, mom, dad, and
Everything
kids, right?
gone. Yeah.
They want,
I mean, it's an evil and corrupt philosophy, largely based on Marxist principles. They've just changed the enemy.
Now, how
They've
about
changed
the
the enemy to white
League,
people.
Ivy League schools like Harvard and Georgetown, those schools that are promoting this?
Yeah, yeah. Well,
And even Notre Dame.
It's done because the wrong administrators are in place and the wrong professors are in place.
So
We
why
need to clean them up.
are rich people then giving their money to these institutions?
I think because they're stupid.
Yeah.
Because they haven't read it. You know, I hear, oh, we don't, you can look at it as a plain dealer. And there'll be letters to the editor. It's racist to say critical race theory is bad for our schools. Who do these people think we are not being able to teach this? They don't know the slightest idea what critical race theory is. Critical race theory is, I mean, I'm not going to get in the weeds, but I mean, this started all with Immanuel Kant and his critique of pure reason. They are rejecting rationalism. They are rejecting objectivity.
Is it a brand of socialism or
It's
communism?
a philosophy that descended from postmodernism, which frankly was a joke when I studied philosophy. It was a joke in the 60s and 70s, in the 80s, and now all of a sudden it's cool.
Who was it
be.
described socialism like this? Socialism is the philosophy of failure, the creed of ignorance, and the gospel of envy.
Correct.
Is that right?
You were right on.
I don't know who wrote
No
it.
better described. I'm not sure.
And critical race theory.
Probably some pretty smart person.
Critical race theory is a kind of an adoption of that.
Well, it's part of it. It's part of it, but really it's based on the oppressiveness of Western civilization and how that's why the people of America who are of color are in the position they're in. You know, and I mean, the facts of the matter, if we had another hour, I'd sit here and I'll tell you exactly why the people of America are in the position they're in. And you know, I was with the Spanish American Committee last week, and all the mayoral candidates were there. And
From Cleveland?
yeah, Bashir Jones got up, who I like personally. He's a good guy. We kind of got to be buddies. But he got up and he said, you know, this systemic racism is something that we've discovered now, and we have to eliminate. And I said, so I got a chance to speak, and I couldn't talk about the city. I was supposed to talk about federal issues, kind of like now when you asked me about the state. But I said, you know, unlike my friend Bashir, I don't believe that this country's systemically racist. I said, but you know what? There is some systemic racism. It's right here in Cleveland. And it's used by the Democrat Party to maintain control. You tell me what city where an unarmed black man was shot that wasn't controlled by Democrats. That they weren't the ones hiring and firing the very policemen that did it. You tell me what city where education is so bad that children of color are not getting good educations. Every one of them is controlled by Democrats who hire and fire the teachers and the superintendents. They're keeping these people in that position and telling them, you have to vote for us because we're going to get you out of the very problem we created. It's an incredible hypocrisy.
I don't know if you ever heard this, but were you alive when Lyndon Johnson was president?
I was alive, sure.
Yeah, but you didn't. It's supposed to have said when the War on Poverty was passed. It was, I think, 1965.
Yeah.
I was here then. I
Yeah, I
just
was here.
a few years ago. And Lyndon Johnson said, and I won't use the language that he did, he says, pass this bill, and he didn't use black person,
I
in
know what he
America
used.
will vote for us for 200 years.
Exactly, and that's exactly what's happened. But you know what? My friends, the people that really have started to look at this, most of the black people I know, most of my friends that are black, are at their core conservative. They just cannot get, they just can't say the word Republican. But more and more are starting to be able to get that word out. And we're seeing more and more Republicans, African American Republicans and Hispanic Republicans. Hispanics are by very nature conservative.
Yes, they
These
are.
people are hardworking, believe in their family, just like the black people. And they just can't see fit to vote Republican because they've been so warped by media.
Mike, would
by,
you agree that war on poverty made blacks dependent?
Well, the
on
Great Society.
government?
You were talking about the
Yeah,
Great Society.
the Great
Absolutely,
Society.
absolutely. It's a shame.
It
And
did more damage.
It did more damage than good. It did.
Okay. Well, like you said, we could probably talk for hours. You're doing
Yes,
a
we
lot
could.
of interviews. I see you were on with Bob Franz.
Oh,
last-
yeah.
last
I
week.
love Bob,
I was listening to you.
He's a good man.
It's great to have you in the studio. I won't take up any more of your time.
Well,
even
you
though
can always
we-
take my time.
We'd love to.
I'll
we'd
come
love-
every week if you want.
Well, anytime, Mike, anytime. We'd love to have you, and I'm sure our listeners enjoyed it. We're going to go. I'm going to play some commercials now and pay some bills here.
Great.
And thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Great to have you. All right. If you could take this out of my